It's 6 o'clock and I'm calling this regular, I think. Okay, now we're ready. It's 6 o'clock and I'm calling this regular meeting of Plainfield Charter Township Board to order. In the absence of Supervisor Coleman, can I get a motion to nominate a President Pro Tem for tonight's meeting?
I move to nominate Susan Morrow as President Pro Tem for tonight's meeting.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Kathy, second by Frank. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we'll get started with the meeting. And I have the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Please bow your heads with me. Our Heavenly Father, we gather to conduct the business of Plainfield Township. We ask you to guide our thoughts as we deliberate the important issues in front of us. We ask you to bless our leaders of our country so that peace can find its way to our country. Let your light shine through us wherever we go, in whatever we do, that wherever you want us to go, the path will be clear for us to follow. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda is the public comments. If you have a subject that you want to talk to the board about, which is not on the agenda, please go over to the podium. Thank you. And give us your name and address for the record and go ahead and make your statement. And each person is allowed 1 3-minute speaking time. Is there anyone who has public comments? And what is your name, sir?
Address.
Steve McKellar, I'm your fire chief.
Hey, we're glad.
You need my address?
We are very glad.
After nearly 43 years of dedicated service, it is with mixed emotions and profound sense of gratitude that I announce my retirement effective June 6, 2024, from Plainfield Township Fire Department. As I reflect on my incredible journey and the countless memories, I am humbled by the honor of having been part of this esteemed organization. My tenure at Plainfield Township Fire Department has been nothing short of remarkable. The unwavering support and camaraderie among colleagues and the shared commitment to safeguarding our community have been the cornerstone of my career. Each day presents unique challenges, yet the unwavering spirit and resilience of this department made overcoming them immensely rewarding. As I embark on a new chapter of my life, I carry with me a deep sense of appreciation for the opportunity, experience, and friendships forged during my tenure. The lessons learned and the memories created will forever hold a special place in my heart. I am grateful to the community and the leadership of Plainfield Charter Township for entrusting me with the responsibility of serving and protecting this community as fire chief. In closing, I express my deepest appreciation for the privilege of serving alongside such dedicated individuals and being part of an organization committed to excellency. I leave with a sense of accomplishment and pride, knowing that Plainfield Township Fire Department will continue its mission of protecting and enhancing the lives of the residents and visitors within the township. Thank you once again for allowing me the honor of serving this remarkable department and community for the past 43 years. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have something calm and? Please give us your address. As Chief McKellar, you neglected your address. Station 3,
Can we vote on that and deny it?
never mind. Who does? Oh, Kathy.
Can we
apologies.
vote on that and
No,
deny it?
we're not voting tonight. Okay, moving on. The next subject is the consent agenda. This is a list of a whole bunch of different items that are going to be approved, if that's what the motion is, with one vote from the Township Board. And if some of you are looking at agendas, that we go from 5A to 5M, and all of those things will be approved with one motion. A motion to approve a motion for the consent agenda would be in order for a board?
I move to approve the agenda, including the consent agenda and the accounts payable.
Support.
The motion was Mr. Pfaff, and the support was Mr. Hagedorn.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Hagedorn.
Yes.
Mr. Pfaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Merrill.
Yes,
Ms. Beatty.
Yes.
And Mrs. Lowenthal, yes.
motion carries. The first, item number 7 is a public hearing this evening. And Cameron, you want to lead us into this?
Yeah, so we have our community development staff with us here tonight too, and they're going to talk through this issue. I imagine this is probably why most people are in attendance tonight. This is something that's come up through the Planning Commission and is now in front of the board based off of a positive recommendation from the Planning Commission. You may know this property is a former church property on the end of Palenque or Palenque, depending on, I've heard it pronounced both ways. I'm told the locals say Palenque, so we'll go with that tonight. So, and so that we have someone who's purchased that and is interested in developing it for housing. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and Peter to describe the process we're in, what the public hearing's for tonight, and what this project's all about.
Hello. That's okay. Hi. So I think Brandon will also speak tonight, but a brief overview of the project. There is an existing church building, like Cameron said. It has had at least one fire at the property. It's currently on a well and septic. There are no utilities up to that site. So the applicants are looking for a PUD rezone to turn the existing church into 18 apartment units and construct 2 new apartment buildings to provide an additional 30 units for a total of 48 units on that just over 5-acre site. The process that we're in now is a rezone from R1B to R3 residential, conditioned upon the immediate rezone to PUD, planned unit development. This sort of conditional zoning has been done before by you folks to allow for a slightly higher density than what is permitted by the underlying zoning as it is right now. The township attorney has vetted this conditional rezoning as an appropriate method if you so choose. Certainly, by no means do you have to do that. So staff is comfortable with this process moving forward. The master plan for this parcel right now is commercial office as part of the East Beltline corridor. However, based on the fact that there's no direct access to the Beltline and the topography, staff thinks that it doesn't really make sense for that to be planned as part of the East Beltline corridor. It's on the fringe of a multifamily master plan area, so again, we're comfortable moving forward, but if the township board thinks that it's not the right direction at this time, that's certainly your call. There are multiple site issues that staff will need to work with the applicant on closely and the planning commission. For the next step, should this receive township board approval, the applicants will come back to the planning commission for site plan approval, at which time the driveway grade will be further discussed. A variance from the private road ordinance is required for a 12% driveway grade over the maximum 10%. Also, pedestrian safety will be further addressed at time of site plan approval. Right now, the applicant has been in communication with Northview School District, and they have not agreed to bring a bus to the end of Palanque. So either, we'll need to get firm communication from Northview that they will definitely bring a bus down there, or the applicant will need to provide some sort of safe means for kids to get from their site to the bus stop. So again, these are issues that are manageable during site plan review, but do inform the discussion today. Stormwater will be a big topic of discussion tonight. The site is heavily wooded with some steep topography, but the applicant has assured us that his engineer can meet our stormwater standards, and that is typically something that is further discussed at site plan review. I sent all of you the letter today that we received. We received comments similar to this letter before. So I want to address the sanitary sewer questions on there kind of directly. So since the applicant is extending sanitary sewer from where it is in Palanque up Palanque into the site, the 4 houses at the end of Palanque that are not currently served by sanitary sewer, per our ordinance, will need to connect to that sanitary sewer within a 10-year time period. So that is triggered after the sanitary sewer is available to them. That will be the cost of the homeowner to do that within 10 years. And the actual extension of the sanitary sewer is the applicant's responsibility. So, Pete, did I miss anything? Okay.
Just on the sanitary sewer, real quick. Connections in a 10-year period, but typically, and Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, upon a point of sale, there could be a connection requirement, and then there may be some other circumstances if a septic fails in that. There was also some comment about maintenance of the regular sewer. There's some truth to that. It costs more to pay your monthly utility bill for sanitary sewer connection than would be to maintain your septic. However, a septic, I think, generally has a 20-year lifespan, and at the end of that, that bill ultimately comes due for replacing the septic, whereas with the sanitary sewer system, you're paying in your maintenance over time. So, it's pay now or pay later in some regards to that, but I did want to clarify that. It was in one of the emails that we received. So that's all I have. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. We'll now conduct the public hearing, the public comment portion of this meeting. And when you have something to say on this subject alone, please come over to the podium and give us your name and address for the record. Is there anyone who would like to make comments on this subject? Go ahead and walk to the podium. Thank you.
My name is Dale Barkema. I live at 4924 Palanque. I have lived there for over 44 years. And I would like to say that I am totally and 100% opposed to the project that's being put before us tonight. The neighborhood has always been very quiet. I can't see putting 48 apartments up there with one egress down our street. The street cannot handle that traffic. and it would not be safe to the existing neighbors and their families and children to create that much traffic on that street. I don't think this is a good use for the property.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this subject? This is the time, there we go. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tim Mulder. I live at 3445 Quetzal, which is right off Palenque or Palenque, as we like to say. And I have a few concerns. Dale, the primary concern is volume, or traffic volume. The density of the development is, in my opinion, way too high for the rest of the infrastructure to handle that. Pete and Elizabeth addressed who's going to pay for the infrastructure improvements that everyone's opposed to, and on that street anyhow. I did have one question, and this is, well, actually, it's a comment. Reading through the zoning ordinance for PUD, it says that sidewalks are required on both sides of the street and internal drives in any PUD development, and I don't see that in the plans. And then unfortunately, to do that, to meet that, they're not going to preserve the nature of the environment there. So they're kind of a rock and a hard place. And then just one other thing. I've heard the presentation that I believe you're going to hear shortly, and having gone through the hearing with the Planning Commission, I now realize that there's no opportunity for rebuttal of some of the statements that are made. So if you hear that current traffic is around 149 cars a day, that's hugely overstated for what we in the neighborhood see. And if you hear that at the public meeting that was held over at the senior center, that there was no opposition, I think the civil discourse that was that everybody presented that night was misconstrued as being acceptance. It was nothing like that. There's totally, as you can see by the neighbors here, lots of opposition to this for the number of reasons stated. And then I know there was a bunch of emails and notes that were sent before the Planning Commission, and I hope those were all presented to you as well. Thank you.
Tim?
Hello, I'm Karen Vandermeulen. I'm here with my husband Chuck. We live at 4910 Palenque. We've been there for about 34 years. And just to reinforce what Mr. Boulder said, could you raise your hand if you're in opposition to this proposal so you just see how many neighbors are here? There are several others that couldn't make it tonight, but it's pretty universal. And I'm not going to repeat what others have said. I totally agree with the density issue. It will change the character of our neighborhood. It is a very nice, quiet neighborhood. I think there was some statement about the fact that it maybe aligns with, there's rolling pines nearby, and there's a office park nearby, and of course we've got our single family homes. But it really doesn't, because it's not like it's sharing a driveway with rolling pines. It's coming through a quiet neighborhood. And I don't think it's an overstatement from Mr. Mulder to say that traffic will be an issue if you've ever tried to take a left-hand turn heading north from eastbound Beltline. You can't. I agree there's other avenues that you can take, but Archer that runs parallel to 2J's at Plainfield, it is a mine. There's just so many, it needs repair. And so it certainly could not handle the traffic. So I just ask that you please deny and not approve tonight's proposal. Thank you.
Else?
My name is Chuck Vandermeulen, 4910 Palanque. Having worked in apartment communities for 40 years, and I was a supervisor for 30, the parking is an issue. We had 2 spaces per apartment, and we still have people parking in fire lanes, green spaces, other people's carports. I'm sure there's not going to be an on-site management or maintenance person with the facility this small. I wonder who's going to address that. We're just concerned it's too much for a small space, and I'm opposed to it also. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's John Johnson. I have the property at 4971
Your last name again, please?
Johnson.
Johnson.
Yep, I didn't stutter.
Oh, I didn't hear.
My property is 4971 Palanque. I've been there my entire life. I mean, I grew up in that street. Even back in the day when the church was active, the traffic wasn't too bad. You know, it was 2-3 days a week or so. But with this kind of PUD going up with that many units, the traffic's going to be just ridiculous. They've got 84 parking spots and you got cars coming and going all the time. I mean, that's a huge group of people. Could be upwards of 200 folks up there. And I'm opposed to having the quiet street I've lived on and been on all this time turned into a driveway for such a huge development. I mean, it's not huge compared to Rolling Pines and the other, but that turns it essentially into just a one access driveway. That's crazy. I'm not excited about it at all.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name is, Jason Owen. I live at 4989 Palanque, which is right on the corner of Grand River and Palanque. The access in and out of our residential driveways sometimes can be difficult enough, especially off of Grand River with the traffic in the mornings and especially during a Little League baseball game down there at D.W. Richardson. Traffic does pack along the street that whole time in the springtime. And I am fundamentally opposed to it based on the traffic volume, the infrastructure, and some of the other things that have been discussed here today. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move to the township board members, and they'll be asking questions that will probably be answered by our community development staff. Mr. Pfaff?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Hagedorn?
I will have a question of the developer, but nothing for you at this point.
Beatty?
Yes, I do have some questions, actually. So the sewer would have to be replaced in a 10-year time period. That's not based on if it were to fail, they would be obligated to connect, but you're stating that it is a 10-year?
So sewer extends about halfway up Palanque, or maybe a quarter of the way, I can't remember exactly. The developer is responsible for extending it up the remainder of the distance. Those people who are directly adjacent within a certain number of feet would be required to connect within 10 years. So essentially it's a new line, a new service, and then those residents would have to connect. There's pros and cons to that. When you get into smaller residential lots, when the septic fails, having that available sometimes is a more affordable option. Often depends on the size of the lot and the soils and what's there.
So they will be required. As far as the street handling that traffic,
In general, our discussions with the Kent County Road Commission where this road is designed and can handle that, that's often the same thing they say about most roads. In my experience, having done this for a long time, it has to be a much larger development for them to want a traffic study or something similar along those lines. It's still within the wherewithal of the board if you want to require one. It's written into the ordinance, a discretionary item, but typically for a project of this size, even though it seems like a lot to the neighbors, the road commission looks at it differently.
and just a couple more. There's no other road outlet for this facility, and I'd be curious the fire chief's comments on that. So you only have that one road coming in and out? There's not another one that,
No, so it is planned just as using Palanque for the ingress egress. The grades to the belt line and the fact that the parcel doesn't have direct access to the belt line makes that second outlet not feasible. The fire chief is, in our conversations with him, has expressed a comfort level with this project because in bringing water up to the site, they're also sprinkling all of the buildings and providing fire hydrants. So it's actually, a better situation for the fire department than it is currently.
Lowenthal?
I'm all set for right now. Thanks.
And so my comments, Peter, am I understanding it correctly that there are 2 rezones?
Yeah, so the way when we redid the private, PUD ordinance, not the private road ordinance, when we redid that about maybe 6, 7 years ago, it was set up to first reconsider the initial, what the underlying zone district was, so you can calculate density. So in almost all circumstances where we're looking at apartment or higher density developments, there'll be a rezone to R3 or some other district to get the density that's appropriate for the PUD. Long story short, we've done this before. Another project, forget the name, Northern Dells on the Beltline, we've done that. It was necessary to get the density to do the apartment development.
Thank you. The next discussions after the decision of the board tonight is a totally different outlook. It goes back to the Planning Commission for the site review. Is that right? Site planning?
Yes, yep, that's right. That's when they'll look at things like stormwater very closely. We'll ask the applicants to have, building renderings at that time. As part of the PUD rezone, we've built into the ordinance to amend that we have control over things like building materials used for the buildings to make sure that, they're of high quality and consistent with the church building. So more nitty-gritty details like that will be discussed at site plan review.
Is that where we'll find out about the sidewalks on both sides of the street? Or can you tell us already that that's going to be a requirement?
So sidewalks are something that the township board has discretion over during this PUD process. So the applicants are proposing sidewalks. It's not really a sidewalk, it's a pedestrian pathway along the access drive. And we're comfortable with that access for pedestrians.
Those pedestrian areas in the winter covered with snow.
So one of the concerns that's come up through this project, and one of the things that they'll address with the planning commission during site plan review, is the grades out there. So to limit the amount of regrading they had to do, so they didn't have to regrade that whole hillside and cut the trees down, we recommended to them that they do a sidewalk cantilevered like you see in a lot of condo developments. Some of them we've done quite recently. I forget the name off of the Thousand Oaks development, but it's not uncommon to have a sort of cantilevered 2 or 3 foot sidewalk on the side. But it was intended essentially to limit or minimize the amount of regrading, and it had to be done, and the amount of trees and vegetation that had to be removed, which then helps with stormwater and those types of issues. They couldn't certainly be required to put a full sidewalk in, but at a 10% grade, it will be challenging.
And this is at 12% right now, is that right?
That is correct.
And the last question, our decision tonight is step 1, but does that automatically mean that there will be approval of step 2?
So step 3 is site plan review. So step 1 was recommendation by the planning commission. So if the township board does decide to rezone the property tonight, The Planning Commission will have to look very closely at these details, but it does make it more likely that the project moves forward.
Thank you. Board members, we've heard the comments from the public, and we've heard each other's comments. Any more comments from the board members? Pardon me?
Are we done with the public hearing?
No, we're missing the developer. I wasn't sure whether, is the developer here? I apologize, I didn't know who you were. Please go ahead to the microphone and tell us about your project.
My name is Brandon Visser. I live at 4848 Walker. I got a little... Should go through.
Brandon, was this something that you showed the planning commission already?
I showed them a very similar presentation, yeah.
Thank you.
Not sure if this is my computer or is it just set up the same way as normal?
I had it there for a second and it disappeared, so I'm not sure what happened.
Let me... Okay. Technology. All right, so this is a little aerial photo of the site. We'll get some better photos here in a second, but to reiterate kind of the process that was discussed already, this is just a visual because I'm pretty visual. So started back in the summer with some staff planning and engineering kind of discovery on the site, went to the Planning Commission in September just for a preliminary site plan review, just general discussion to get some feedback. Then held a neighborhood meeting in December where we invited 217, roughly 20 to 30 people attended. And there was just question and answer and a similar presentation presented for information for those people, about an hour and a half. After that, we went to the Planning Commission, December, I think it was 12, for the PUD rezone request. It was a favorable recommendation. We went through in depth a lot of the same things that were already brought up tonight, and they felt comfortable moving forward up at least to this point. So after that, we met with staff again in January and hit all the items that were brought up and kind of concerns. We met with the fire chief, the township engineer, and the planners to discuss any of those opportunities to improve the site. And we did make changes that are reflected on the site plan tonight. So this plan has been ever developing since the beginning. If, depending on the outcome tonight, obviously, then the last step is the Planning Commission, which was discussed. Just a couple more visualizations of the site. So this is the church property up on top of the hill, right adjacent to the belt line, but not connected. It's got some office and general commercial use alongside the belt line, and then the end of the cul-de-sac of Palenque, and a couple houses scattered in there, but heavily wooded and a nice private little area. Looking to the south, you can see the overlying PUD down south with condos and apartments. Those are the neighbors. And just kind of another visualization of the site, because it's really hard to get a depiction of this property from 1,000 feet up. So as we kind of go up the driveway here, you can see this is the grade of the driveway that we want to retain. We're not talking about changing it, we're talking about making it wider and better. So the fire chief's concession that we had a discussion with was, let's widen that out to 30 feet of paved surface. It's probably around 20 right now, so we're talking about widening it out so that in the case of an emergency, fire trucks had an easier time getting up there. That was seemingly a better idea at the planning level than cutting all the trees down and reworking the driveway. So it's a little bit of give and take. There wasn't a perfect option, but we thought we found the best solution. You can kind of get a good feel for the uniqueness of that church building up there on top of the hill and the parking area up on top of the hill. So when we see the site plan, you'll get a better feel of why we laid it out that way. And then panning to the north, you can see kind of that Northland Drive commercial corridor. This would be a great feeding opportunity for just some local housing opportunities for some of those businesses. We already kind of talked about zoning, so this is just reiterating what you've already seen. Master plan for future land use map. So Elizabeth already hit on that. It was zoned commercial or proposed for future commercial. So this is our site plan. It's kind of an odd shape, uniquely formatted to this site for that unique topography, trying to preserve as much as we can. This site had a history. It burned, the church had a fire. After that fire that was neglected and not used, it was vandalized multiple times and still kind of currently is. Owner still gets calls there and is police having to go up there. So it's not a great situation as it is. Obviously, nobody wants it to stay that way. So the limitations with the sewer up the road are really constricting to letting this site develop into something other than something unique like this, because it costs a lot of money to bring sewer down the road and repave the road, and then obviously to get all those utilities up the hill, because none of them exist right now. So, part of me wishes churches were booming and we could bring another church in there, but it just hasn't taken root. So, just to hit on a few key points, 18 units would be put into the existing church building with a small addition on the end, so repurposing that building into studio and one-bedroom residences, which is a growing demand right now and definitely a scarcity in Plainfield. The other new buildings would all be two-bedroom, two-bath for the most part. We don't have any three-bedroom currently proposed, so density as far as bedroom count is less than a typical single-family home or anything resembling that. It's probably closer to half. So we kind of factored that in with our site layout, trying to keep as much green space as we can and keep the buildings on the high and already cleared areas on the site, which is why we follow that kind of top of the hill look. There's 69% of the site that we would essentially be either preserving with trees or using for some detention area or green space or grass. So 5.5 acres is a pretty good sized site. As far as a straight density calculation goes, it's not overly dense for many comparable projects in the township. It's rather in line with something to this size. Obviously, we're trying to find that balance between what fits with this geographical location. I mentioned the driveway already. I mentioned utilities, so we're covered there. We do have covered parking, one space per residence currently proposed in front of the buildings. That was a staff recommendation. And we added 10 actual garage spaces as well for additional enclosed parking. So these are not low-end residences. They would be nicer, brand-new units that would hopefully attract younger, newer business, professional type class of demographic, as well as some small families. As far as the pedestrian safety concerns that were brought up, so this is kind of not an exact reflection, but a good visual of what that would look like. So this is pavement on the one side, and then still pavement, but a marked area for pedestrians. And we're proposing flexible delineators, which are those vertical pylons that actually can bend over and get run over by a car if needed to, in the case of an emergency where a fire truck had to make that turn and therefore could use some of that paved surface for their for their trucks. This gives pedestrians a dedicated, safe walking place, but also doesn't, like we mentioned earlier, overdevelop the driveway to the point where we have to cut more trees down and put in large retaining walls for a separated sidewalk off to the side. And also, it was mentioned that vehicles tend to kind of gain speed as they go down the hill and build speed as they approach the hill. So with fire department's kind of permission, we proposed 2 speed humps that would be marked. It's not overly aggressive as far as the height goes, so it still works for plow trucks and for safety emergency vehicles, but it does slow people down and give them a cue to at least be aware of what they're doing. So we believe that this is a good start to something of getting vehicles to keep a good balanced speed. As far as stormwater goes and grading, this is kind of a grading plan showing the topographical lines. The detention area you can see down at the northeast corner, that is right in this area here. It's intended to be dry. There's no, we're using permeable soils, so sandy soils. Adam Feenstra is here. He's going to talk a little bit about the infiltration method of stormwater management, which ultimately, again, reduces the need to clear more trees and have more water storage because we're using the hillside and the sandy soils within it. But ultimately, our goal is to try to come up with a remedy and have a professionally designed solution for stormwater, because right now residents have made many comments at the neighborhood meeting and the last planning commission meeting that stormwater is a major concern and runoff is a concern, and they said that there's already some happening just because of the history of this site and the hill. So what we're proposing, we're also adding some gutters along the side. It's kind of hard to see here. If I zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see here, there's a gutter pan on the side of this driveway here with a drain connecting to the storm sewer and routing to the detention area, and then another curb along this entire edge of the driveway there. Ultimately, managing that surface water and putting it to where we want it instead of running off into places that we don't. That really prevents a lot of the soil erosion as well. So I was going to invite Adam Feenstra up here just to give a little bit of his professional side of the engineering that goes into stormwater design, because I know that was a really big question that I don't have the engineering background to answer, but I think he'll just give you a 1 to 2 minute overview of how he comes up with designing this system.
Hello, as Brandon said, my name is Adam Feenstra with Feenstra & Associates. Yeah, stormwater is always a big deal. And Plainfield Township is one of the few individual townships that has their own dedicated stormwater ordinance and their own MS4 permit. So it's extra important to you guys, which kudos to you. I think a lot of people are moving that direction. You're just kind of ahead of the curve there. So I am familiar with Plainfield Township's specific ordinance. I've gone through it and worked through it before on other sites. And so I'm confident of our ability to meet the requirements of the ordinance on this site. And we're planning on doing that through infiltration, both with perforated pipe in the storm sewer system to get as much of that water in the ground as soon as possible, and to reduce the size of this detention pond and reduce how much tree clearing we need to do. And then in the detention pond itself. From an engineering perspective, we're always very conservative when we're talking about infiltration rates. A lot of times you get sand and you could sit there and you could dump water down it all day long and it just soaks it all in. That's not what we designed to. We designed that it's going to soak in much slower. So we always try to be conservative. And even with that conservative value, going through the standard spreadsheets and stuff that the township has adopted, we're showing full compliance with the ordinance, and fully retaining the 25-year storm runoff. So not a stick of water will leave the site in the required 25-year storm. And I would also like to point out too, that's we designed it, or we're looking at it as the entire site. A lot of times with a redevelopment situation like this, it is allowed and acceptable practice to just look at the redeveloped portions of the site. Instead, we are looking at it as all of the pavement, the whole thing. We want to make sure that we're accounting for everything here. So I think that's important to note, that we really do want to make the stormwater situation on the site better. And we heard concerns about runoff and such, and that's why we are really leaning in on the infiltration design to make sure that we really won't be running off stormwater, except maybe in, you know, the once in a century storm. Maybe you'd get something out of that pond, but otherwise, totally taken care of on site.
And again, I apologize for not recognizing you.
All right, so just to briefly talk about some traffic, because I know that was a concern from some people tonight. And it's been a concern for us from the beginning. It is a unique layout, and we want to be conscientious of that. Currently, right now, there's roughly 30,000 vehicles going up the Beltline every day. That number was from a Kent County road survey. On the west side of Grand River Drive, there's currently, this is maybe a year and a half old, there was around 600 to 700 vehicles coming and going through that westbound side per day. On the east side, it was closer to 3,000 to 3,300, depending on which test it was. So we did some general calculations on our impact to that current traffic, and I made a phone call personally to MDOT and Kent County Roads, and similar to what Pete said earlier, the numbers that we're adding to the system are fully, the current design of the infrastructure roadway of Palenque and Grand River Drive are not going to be overburdened in their standards. Will there be a difference between yesterday and post-development? Absolutely, there always is. We're adding residents to the neighborhood, so obviously there's going to be a change, but is that change within reason? We delineated, yes. Kent County Roads and MDOT, we use their standards, we use their advice for when a change or an improvement is merited, and they didn't really indicate to us that there was any concerns with what we're adding to the system. As far as the church renovation, so we kind of saw the video and the pictures of that building earlier, but it's dated, but it's also got some beauty to it. So this building has some really cool architectural ceilings we want to utilize, doing some kind of loft floor plans with some beds over living and walkout patios on the back, all contained in that older church building. We want to completely redo the exterior, revitalize it, make it look brand new again, so it would not carry the exact depiction it is right now, which looks a little bit run down, but still keeping the integrity of the footprint, being stewards of what's there, foundations, roof structure, all of that is, it looks like it's perfectly manageable to be redeveloped and reused, so we're gonna try to do that, and we're pretty excited about that as opposed to just bulldozing this site over and starting from scratch. Covered car parking, so just offering, again, like I said, some amenities to our new residents, covered parking, some outdoor patio spaces, amenities and green space was important. We want it to be a place where people get to enjoy what everyone else on that street does right now, and in that area, which is the hillside, the woods, and the beautiful parts of this site. So nothing overly robust, but doing something that can get people to be able to use the outdoors as much as possible. I think that covers everything that I have. I'm sure you guys have questions, so I'm happy to answer anything you got.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian? No, Jack? Brandon, I'm sorry.
All right.
The word apartment was used, and nothing was said about this. Are you selling these units, or are you going to be superintendent of an apartment house?
So right now, they're intended just to be rental units. So they would be, I have a proposed kind of rent rate, and this is obviously just a preliminary, but doing something with eight studio, 10 one-bedrooms, and the 32 bedrooms, some of those could get interchanged with 1 to 2s. But keeping a square footage that's still affordable, but it would definitely be in the middle to upper range as far as rates go around. But there's obviously still a big demand for something in this kind of slot as far as housing goes. So most of them would be true to rental.
So the discussion about sanitary sewer then applies to you personally, not to the people that would be buying units because they're not buying them. Is that correct?
Yeah, all the sewer comes back to the owner of the property or the development, yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Board members, any additional questions?
I was wondering about on-site management. Is there any on-site management?
There's not an office for on-site management. Our proposed management companies are all local, so they're within 10 or 15-minute drives. That has typically been a kind of industry standard for most developments this size. I don't see an office and on-site management typically unless you're in the bigger properties with 150-plus units. So this would be one of a couple properties right in the Plainfield area that are managed locally.
Thanks.
Any other questions from board members? Kathy?
Out of the 5.5 acres, how much of this is developed
Developed as in,
of your plan?
yeah, so there's 69% that we're leaving green space or we're taking something out and creating green space. So roughly, we're using 30% of the site for parking and buildings.
You mentioned there's only one parking spot for each
Covered parking spot.
covered, but there is ample parking. I'm just thinking of a lot of families have 2 cars.
Yeah, it's around 1.77, I believe, is the number, somewhere in there for parking spaces per dwelling. Some of the rationale with that was we have over 15 units that are single bedroom or studio, in which a lot of the times it's kind of standard to reduce parking to some extent, but that was kind of another give and take with staff from September was, do we want to add more parking spaces because we had some opportunities to wiggle some parking spaces in, or do we want to create more buffer and green space? So what are we actually going to need? But you know, in the instance that the Planning Commission, if we got to that point, deemed we wanted additional parking, we do have some space for that.
Has there ever been a consideration of having fewer than the 48 units? Has there been an option B that perhaps neighbors could live better with?
I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth with the development side of that, and I think the biggest factor here is the cost of getting back there. Running the water main up that driveway with the sewer and then hydrants, not only just to the top, but also down the hole to the south side of the property line was added with the fire department. So it ends up being a lot of infrastructure, whether it's 12 residences up there or in a single building still falls under commercial code, which requires them to be sprinkled, and we want them sprinkled so that the hill is less of an emergency factor because the property is more safely managed up top by itself. So unfortunately, if we ended up doing a reduction in units, we probably lose a little bit of the feasibility of the project. And I don't know exactly where that threshold is, but we're not trying to, I mean, we could fit more if we tried to Lego more pieces of building footprints into this. We thought what we were asking for is pretty reasonable as far as the 30% space we're taking up, and trying to find that balance. It's kind of been a part of our process from the beginning.
Board members, any additional questions?
Are these questions or comments or both?
Questions, comments, or both?
Okay, yes, I have comments. I thought maybe you were going to have us questions first and then comments later, so.
Well, let's move into comments then. Jack?
I appreciate the changes that you have made since the Planning Commission. As you understand, I'm on the Planning Commission, and I was one of those who voted no. The sentiment of the Planning Commission, as I can gauge it, and I'm not certain, I didn't talk to every member, but the sentiment that I got from the Planning Commission, those that voted yes, was, if not this, then what? And that is a legitimate question. If you're not going to approve this, what would you ever approve? And that's a legitimate statement. I appreciate what you've done with the drainage and having the expert come in. The care that you've talked about in terms of the roadway in the winter and the traffic, it's good. I appreciate the change in the setback, because I know one of the residents had a problem with one of the units being close to him. So you've done the change there. I guess that's all the comments I have at this time. I just wanted to let you know how I felt about the changes you made. I appreciate those.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Kathy?
I have one more question. So what is your minimum occupancy and your maximum for what you've got there,
As far as number of bedrooms or,
as far as residents?
so 48?
So you're going to have it restricted to one person per unit?
No, it's, so you're saying number of
Occupancy.
people?
Yeah, how many people?
I don't think there's I'm sure there's a management limit as far as number of heads per residence. I'd have to, I don't know, it's probably a state something or another. But limiting the number of bedrooms, we're trying to keep this to not large, obviously, there's not gonna be large groups in any of these that's not designed. There's plenty of options for larger groups or families on the Beltline, as I'm sure you know. This is a special project geared towards people who want a little bit more of a small town community feel up in this kind of preserved, quiet area. Not really, there's no big playground, there's no big infrastructure. The beauty and the amenity really is the site itself.
Thank you.
Board members, a motion would be in order. Oh, I apologize. I need to close the public hearing first. And board members, a motion would be in order.
Just to close the public hearing?
No, that's
No.
I just,
She can do that by motion, by action of the chair.
the public hearing is closed. And is there a motion on this subject?
Since no one else is making a motion, I guess I will, and you can vote me down. I move that the Township Board deny the ordinance to amend to rezone 4875 Palanque Place from R1B residential to R3 residential and then to PUD planned unit development based on the following finding: the proposed rezoning and development is not consistent with the future land use plan and the current Township master plan.
Is there support?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying
Roll vote.
roll call vote. I apologize. Mrs. Lowenthal, please.
Okay, Ms. Beatty,
Yes.
Mrs. Merrill,
No.
Mr. Hagedorn,
Yes.
Mr. Pfaff,
Yes.
Ms. Lowenthal, yes.
So the motion to deny is approved. Thank you for coming and for being part of this. And we're going to move on with the agenda, which means I think we're going to be moving out of this room for a few minutes. So thank you very much for coming.
Got the flood mitigation first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pretty close, weren't we? Under new business. Oh, okay. Peter, we're at 8B.
All right, we've been working on this for a couple years, so there's a lot of anticipation built up with this one. All right, we'll wait a second. Well, first, I just want to go back. We started a couple years ago on this project. We've held off a little bit while we're waiting on this grant to go through and the floodplain maps to be adopted for Kent County in this last year. So now we're at that point, and I do want to extend to the folks that helped with this, and I just wrote this up. They're a grateful, incredible group. They really were very helpful and dedicated their time, and I'm talking about the floodplain committee that assisted in drawing up this plan and stuff, and I really appreciate the work that they put in and the time and effort. So I'm very thankful for that. And just an overview of this, I don't, unless you have a lot of questions on it, essentially this is a framework, a policy guide for us. It's a to-do list of things that we can do for our own unique floodplain and our own unique situation in Plainfield Township, which is unique on the west side of the state and certainly unique in Kent County. We are governed by a hazard mitigation plan for the entire county that covers this, as well as every other disaster, but we wanted something a little bit more specific for our residents, and this is the culmination of that work. So that is it in a nutshell. I think you'll see in the staff report, we have a to-do list that we came up with the assistance of the group. It touches on a lot of things that we've talked about in the past, including acquisition grants and river gauges, some new stuff, a lot more emphasis on education this time around, but I'm happy with this thing, and hopefully you're happy with it also, and so staff is recommending approval.
Thank
That's all I
you.
got.
Are there any people in the audience that would like to comment on this subject? Moving on, board members' comments? Mr. Pfaff?
I am all set, thanks.
Mr. Hagedorn?
I appreciate the work that you've done on this, and I'm good with it. Thanks.
Mrs. Beatty?
If Peter's happy, we're happy. I do have a question, though, sorry. How will this affect the people that are living currently in the flood zone?
In a nutshell, it gives them more voice into it, and a part and participation. There's an establishment of a committee, it's a recommendation in there, so essentially taking this advisory group that we had and making them a full committee, and we probably meet on an annual basis and subject to flooding and emergency situations. But I think it gives them a greater voice in what we do and a feeling of participation in some way to steering policy.
Lowenthal?
I'm all set. Thanks for your hard work.
I too congratulate you on all the hard work that went into this. A motion would be in order.
I move to approve the resolution to adapt the Plainfield Charter Township 2024 Flood Hazard Mitigation Plan as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and there's a roll call vote, please.
Hey, Ms. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. Pfaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrow?
Yes,
Mr. Hagedorn?
Yes.
Mrs. Lowenthal, yes.
motion carries. On to the next subject. We're going to depart.
Yeah, I think that'll be easiest if we step into the next room.
We're going to go into the conference room for a little bit, and we will be back.
You have
I
to move to
move.
do it.
Nope, I need a motion to go into the conference room.
I move to enter into closed session pursuant of Section 8D of the Michigan Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase of real property.
Support.
Roll call vote.
Hey, Mr. Pfaff?
Yes.
Ms. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. Hagedorn?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrow?
Yes,
Mrs. Lowenthal, yes.
we'll be back.
think I did.
Returning to open session, may I have a motion to return to open session, please? Oh,
We need to do one
in public.
I move that we go back into open session.
Second?
A motion, all those in favor signify by, this says, I move to,
Yeah, ayes and nays.
yes, no, it's not a roll call.
Okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, motion carries. We'd like to have a short summary, Peter, of the agenda item.
Sure. What you have before you tonight is a FEMA hazard mitigation grant for the acquisition of up to 14 properties. It's entirely voluntary by the property owner, and disbursement of the funds will be incremental over the next 2.5 years. One of the key parts of this particular agreement that we've not had in the past is it's a 90-10, meaning they will match 90% of the cost of this program, which is roughly $2.3 million. In the past, we've been on the hook for 25%. This is something that's rare and unusual as far as we understand, so we're very lucky at this point in time to have that opportunity. And I will leave that at that, and if you have any other questions, please let me know.
Any additional questions from board members? A motion would be in order.
I move to approve the resolution to accept a State of Michigan hazard mitigation grant. Submit offers to purchase up to 14 parcels of real property pursuant to the grant, demolish any structures on any purchased parcel of real property and related matters.
Roll call vote, please.
Support.
Support from Mr. Pfaff. Roll call vote, please.
Hey, Mr. Hagedorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Merrill,
Yes.
Ms. Beatty,
Yes.
Mr. Pfaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Lowenthal, yes.
And Cameron, do you want to give us some informational items?
Actually, I think Pete wants to give you some
Oh.
information.
This really is community development night, isn't it?
You're not retiring, are you, Pete?
No.
He may after tonight.
Please.
Well, a couple years ago, we promised you to give you regular annual reports on our mining operations. This is the culmination of that. You will on an annual basis be getting these. Timing might be a little bit different depending on when we get our inspections and everything together, but what you have before you tonight, and I'll tackle both of these at the same time for ease, is for the Woodworth pit, that's Grand Rapids gravel, and a report of what their status is, as well as one for Mike Ruschi's Plainfield gravel and sand pit, which was a bit more complicated because it was an existing pit, which had overran its time. In regards to the Woodland one, we are now at that point where we're along a couple phases, and per the PUD, or not PUD, per the soil removal agreement, we will have to do a flyover and another inspection. The flyover will get the topographical data from the property, so we have something to match for future to match their progress against. It's something that we've already done for Mr. Ruschi's pit. The good news on both of these, at least according to the property owners, is they are on pace to meet their requirements. They're in phase 3 for the Woodland pit and moving ahead. And that, I think we're pretty much set with that one. The one that was more temperamental, I'll say, back was Mr. Ruschi's, and that's where we went through a lot of benchmarks, we'll call it, performance standards. And in this case, they are ahead, according to them, of their performance standards. The key for us will be measuring what happens when we do the flyover, and probably a new officer prepared to do that this spring. And just for a reminder on that, the first phase of that project is just to get the existing piles out of there. And if they get all those piles out of there, then they can go in and actually mine some of the remaining material. So I put these before you for your consideration as general information. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Board members' comments to Peter? Mr. Pfaff?
I'm all set, thanks.
Jack?
Fine, thanks.
Kathy?
All set?
And the other Kathy?
All set.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the information. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Superintendent's comments.
Okay, a few comments for you tonight. First, you had a really brief opportunity just a minute ago to meet our intern, Jace Kim. Jace has just joined us this past week. He's a recent graduate from Calvin University and has an interest, growing interest in local government. So he's learning what township government's like, and he is jumping in the deep end with elections. So he's been helping Tina for the last little more than a week now, and really getting a good experience. He understands, some of the complexity of the election system, but also some of the questions that residents come with. So he has the opportunity to see what all this change in election law has meant, not just for our staff, but also for our residents, as things are different for our staff, things are also different for our residents, and trying to work through what all that means for both ends. So welcome, Jace. Glad to have you here tonight and have you learn a little bit more about how we operate in Plainfield Township. A couple other items to share tonight. So last meeting you approved the road plan. Well, we already have to amend that. So Road Commission has been getting bids on road work, and it's not pretty. Most of it has been about 20% above estimate. And they don't, I asked if they had additional money, if I found additional money to cover it, if they could match it, and they said no. No, we heard that, Jen and I heard that straight from Jerry Byrne today. He said, sorry folks, there's no more money to match beyond what Road Commission already committed to. So they'll still honor the match on our $750,000, they just can't go above and beyond that. So even if I were able to scrape together another $100,000 or whatever it is, no go, he said.
So basically, it's not going to go as far.
Correct. So we'll spend the same amount of money, we'll just won't do as much roads. So we'll have to revise our work plan, we'll work with the Road Commission to figure out what to cut out of that plan. We'll have to revise the maps, and hopefully it's not too impactful on this year's plan. Some of what we had planned for this year also includes utility projects, some sewer projects, water projects. So it may not look quite as bad as that 20% number, but we will have to revise that.
We've gotten a little spoiled over these years,
We have been a little bit spoiled, although prices have increased a little bit, but.
but our money went even farther. That's too bad.
Yep. So anticipate that getting reduced, and I'll share that once the Road Commission comes up with a revised plan. Governance Committee will be meeting tomorrow to go over the process for selecting a new trustee. We've had 11 applicants for that seat, so a lot of interest. We'll have to figure out how to handle that. Governance Committee will have to come up with a recommendation for how best to go through that many applicants. If you interview them all, as long as you did the treasurers, you're going to be here for a long, long day. So you have to figure out what solution you want to take to selecting that next person to sit on the board. And my final note, I want to say my thanks and appreciation to Chief McKellar. He has been just a wonderful person to work with over the years. I know this is a really hard night for him to deliver that speech to you. I admit I had an advanced copy of it, so it didn't shock me as much as it shocked you, but as hard as it is for you, I have to say it's been a race well run, or in your case, a race and a swimming competition and a biking, the whole triathlon well competed. So my appreciation to what you've done in the fire department since taking the helm. You've really created a lot of unity in a unit that wasn't so unified. You create unity not just within your department, but also between your department and other departments in the township and the leadership sitting up here. So I have really heartfelt appreciation for your work here, and we really wish you the best in retirement. You just can't go quite yet. So don't check out on me for the next couple of months here. 2 more projects. So we will start the process for finding that next chief with really big shoes to fill. So my thanks to you, Steve. That's all I have.
Thank you. Board members' comments? Kathy? Kathy Beatty.
I would have to repeat all that has been said in honor of you, Chief. I've only been here, 3 years, going on 4, but you certainly made an impact and appreciate so much your service to all of us. So I do have another matter that I do want to speak to because legislation has passed that is removing some of the local control on renewable energy. And that was one of the events that I went to at the Capitol MTA group. And it was not taken proper care. I don't think it was rushed through to gain the state more control than the locals should have. So they had a little gratuity in there of something, oh, you could go through locals, but it's much easier to go through the state. So I do have a petition. There is a drive going to try to reverse that. And so I do have that, and there's explanation on here as far as how in-depth you want to go in understanding that. I won't take a lot of time, but I do have a petition here to sign to revert that control back to the locals where it is always better. So if you are interested in signing that, board and audience, please let me know.
Thanks, Chief, for bringing excellence to our fire department. The reputation of Plainfield Township is just stellar in the fire department community. Thank you for that and for all you've done for our community and your service for all these years. It's very much appreciated.
Frank?
Well, every time I've addressed you, I've called you chief, every single time over the last 7 years. And Chief, I just really appreciate your leadership. It's been stellar, and just wish you all the luck in your next endeavor. Thanks.
Jack?
Agreed. As far as your chief going, Chief, we're really going to miss you. I wanted to give some background onto the striking of taxes. This has been my first go-round with this, and had to face the creation of 17 files in order to do this. There are 8 different entities that you have to send notices to. And so in terms of the amount of time, we probably should have started in mid-January to do this. So we were under the gun. I got in here to do it, and Warren had already created 17 files. Oh. So it was just kind of amazing to me, and kudos to him, and please pass that along. He did a great job. We did have to modify 16 of the 17, but that's something that has to be done every year. So that's something. We got it done today. Send emails out to everybody. The next step would be to get okays back from everybody. We gave that tonight based on our consent agenda here. So the other 7 have to give theirs back, and then we go to Kent County, to Kentwood. The treasurer of Kentwood is going to collect them all, and they will go in front of the judge, and the judge will rubber stamp it. So that's the way it goes.
Good, thank you. And I too wish you well. I knew it was coming. It was a little bit off the wall, but on the other hand, I'm glad that you made the first step here, and I hope that lots of people have a chance to tell you how much we appreciate what you did for 30 years, 33 years? 43 total.
Wow.
Well, just congratulations, Steve. Any other subjects to come before the board? The meeting's adjourned.